Hello, everyone. Have you ever found yourself sitting in a Monday meeting where the meeting is dedicated to reviewing last week's results and planning for the next week, and you think, oh man, it would have been better if I had just done all this myself. It would definitely have been higher quality, faster, and at least it would actually be done. But here we are discussing it for the third week in a row, and it's only 3 hours of work. I have these thoughts regularly, but on the other hand, I understand that sometimes employees really are necessary. Of course, employees who know how to use neural networks are needed, but they are still necessary. Thoughts about hiring, about team interaction, about possible formats of collaboration, about the future of all these career paths, in other words, where we are headed as the world is changing, these thoughts occupy my mind. It seems to me that we are right on the threshold of some big changes. All these thoughts really occupy me, so there will be a series of videos about this. I will share my thoughts, how we do things, some life hacks, and some of my philosophical reflections about the future. Let's figure it out. Let's go. Well, look, this is how it used to be. So, a person would come to work, and as Stas Kuzovov says, they would bring their body, and then it was up to the employer to figure out what to do with that body, with that employee. But that's a crude comparison. When I first heard it, I didn't understand what it was about. By the way, now I understand this metaphor a bit better. What does it mean? It means that, as it used to be, a person would come to work and say, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do, this is at least a somewhat strong side of mine, though usually it's just average, and this here is a complete failure for me, and naturally I'm not able to learn or do anything about it. And if you still want to pull me forward somehow, then that's your responsibility. In large companies, it generally sounds like this. Please pay for some trainings for me, and I'll attend them during work hours, just enjoying myself and having fun there. And heaven forbid you might even pay for my MBA. That's actually my worst nightmare, that companies would pay for employees' MBAs. Although, for example, McKinsey does that, but that's a different story. So in the past, a person like that would come in with their skills and you would fit them in somewhere like in Tetris. You'd think, okay, I can give him this, but not that. He knows how to do this, he can handle these 5% of tasks, and for the remaining 95%, I'll have to finish them myself for him. And it's this endless game of sliding tiles or Tetris, trying to fit his skills somewhere, figuring out what to do with him, while the person himself isn't really developing or interested in looking any better in this game of Tetris. You might say, well, not everyone is like that. Well, not everyone is like that. Yes, of course, we're talking about those cases that are the most problematic, the ones that take up the most time and energy for the entrepreneur. So this person is just the way he is, basically saying, do with me what you want. And I believe that this situation should change very soon. I honestly can't wait because it's the employee's own responsibility to be super convenient for this game of Tetris. In other words, it's the employee's responsibility to understand which of their strengths fit which tasks, and if there's something they absolutely can't do, then how we're going to work together as a team. I honestly don't understand how it happened that this became the employer's problem, but nevertheless, in today's world, especially in our countries, I don't know how it is in the US or China, where there's a more capitalist atmosphere, but in our countries, for some reason, it's definitely the entrepreneur's pain, the employer's pain, and not the employee's own concern. And here we come to a very important lesson that I've learned during my entrepreneurial journey. If you can avoid hiring someone on staff, don't hire them on staff. This whole thing with self-employed workers, which is now developing in our countries, the topic of contractors, of third parties, it's a really great thing. The fewer people you have on staff, the better. I think you all agree with me. It's just that sometimes it's impossible, right? Sometimes we do need people on staff, but overall, I think that in the future we'll all be entrepreneurs for ourselves, and our careers will be just like entrepreneurial ventures where I also take on certain risks, where I am responsible, where I am accountable for the results, not just sitting at my workplace dressed up early in the morning in a nice dress or suit, and then leaving it up to others to figure out what to do with me. I think all of that should disappear completely, and everything should work differently. That is, everyone will be more or less self-employed, and there won't be any of these 3-month notice periods like in Germany and all those European welfare states or all those unemployment benefits. Well, I won't get into that topic, let unemployment benefits stay, I don't mind, but there won't be all these burnout leaves and so on and so on. Why? What is a 3-month notice period anyway? It means that a person is in such a non-adult position that we don't believe that if we fire them, they'll somehow manage on their own. They'll find a job, they have some kind of safety net. So do we really have so little faith in people that we have to pay them this severance for 3 months for some reason? I think a person should always be ready for the possibility that this whole life could end, and then a new life accordingly could begin. And people in mid-level positions, I think they save up a safety net, they have those 3 months, they have some ideas. If not this company, then some other company, right? And by paying them these 3 months, are we putting them in a childlike position? So it's like we're holding their hand, and all of this only has a worse effect on the business climate. Because of course, if you can't just fire someone easily, then you also won't hire them easily in the first place. So hiring will always be a risky move. Like, what if this person ends up being a burden and you can't just fire them? So, to sum up everything I've discussed about what's wrong with hiring, at the very least, the problem is that we can't just fire people easily. And that's where all these ideas come from, that if you can work with contractors or self-employed individuals, you should work with them instead. The second point we'll discuss today comes from my personal life. For example, if I complain to my parents that an employee behaved differently than I expected and now I'm upset and don't know what to do about it, they always tell me, well, Katja, if everyone were as smart, decent, responsible and enterprising as you, they would all have started their own businesses. We work with these kinds of people because they haven't gone off to start their own businesses. So basically we have what we have and we just have to accept it. By the way, I don't agree with this idea, and now I'll explain why. Maybe about 35 years ago, let's say in the 90s, when there really were a lot of opportunities in our countries, of course there were a lot of different things going on, but there were also plenty of opportunities for entrepreneurial activity. And back then, it was true that the smartest, bravest, and most enterprising people started their own businesses. Now that's no longer the case. Now everything is much more competitive. You can't just stick a stick in the ground and expect anything to grow. No, now not just any stick will grow. Everything has changed. Now there are lots of great companies everywhere, lots of smart people, and this growth still exists, but it's not as explosive and not as easy as before. Although maybe in 30 years our children will also say that back then, 30 years ago, everything was so great, but you get what I mean. So I myself have been on the other side of the barricades. I myself have worked as an employee. For example, I worked at Yandex for 5 years, and not only there. And sometimes I really miss those times and think about how great it was at Yandex, and maybe I should try to create something like that in my life again. And I can explain where this nostalgia comes from. Well, first of all, in such a large and cool company, you get to be part of something truly great, something grand and beautiful. In my own business, I probably won't get to experience that for at least the next 15 years. Well, God willing, maybe I will, but I'm not really counting on it. I mean, Yandex is already an established, awesome company where you can come in as a complete beginner, so to speak, and immediately dive into super cool, huge, large-scale projects. And that kind of scale in my own business is still out of reach for me right now. Secondly, as funny as it may sound, sometimes there is actually more freedom there, and sometimes there are more opportunities to do what you enjoy. It sounds funny because, for example, when I worked in the corporate world, I never thought that way. I felt almost like a galley slave being forced to do things. But in reality, it's actually the entrepreneur who sometimes, though not always, ends up without that freedom because some employees have only done what they could. And the entrepreneur has to finish everything else, take it all the way to the result, and bear all the responsibility. And strangely enough, there is actually this significant advantage within the professional corporate world. You often find yourself doing exactly what you can, and truly what you enjoy most. And the things you can't do or don't like are done by other people. But an entrepreneur sometimes doesn't have such a great opportunity. The third point, Stas Kuzovoy once said that an employee comes to work, brings their body, and exchanges these hours of their life for a salary. At first I didn't understand the meaning of this metaphor. It seemed a bit crude and generally unclear to me. Now I understand it more. Many people come to work and say, "This is who I am, please find a place for me here somehow." I don't really develop myself much. Well, of course, there's always the option to fire someone. But again, there's the question of how much you have to pay them. But overall, sometimes a person just says, "This is who I am." The weaknesses I have, I probably won't do anything about them at all. So just find a place for me. And if God forbid the company makes beer, right? And in general, life goes on, everything changes, and some old skills become not very relevant anymore. And so it becomes the employer's or entrepreneur's headache to figure out where to place this person, how to fit them into this new, ever-changing world. And I brought you a children's book here. My wonderful close friend Nastya works at a company called Apple. Yes, a familiar name. And she wrote a book called Silicon Raspberry about life in Silicon Valley. Let me read it to you. You need to move forward, then write a resume, then row forward again. Oh, excuse me, is it okay to crawl? Let's look at it objectively. Crawling is not effective at all. But if rowing doesn't work for you, you'll take some courses. Something like that. And there are many more wonderful poems in this book. It's actually about working in a corporation and about life in the valley, in Silicon Valley. But the idea is that crawling is completely ineffective. But if rowing doesn't work for you, you'll take some courses, something like that. In other words, the company itself is constantly thinking about how to develop a person so that in our new world they can make better use of themselves within the company. And this is a rather strange position, as if we're walking on our heads instead of our feet. If we were walking on our feet, then actually this would be the responsibility of the employee themselves. This is our introductory video. Let me still share some techniques that we use when working with people. Well, first of all, I get really frustrated with people who come to me before they've asked a neural network, yes, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever. That's it, the world has changed. Now, we first ask the neural network, then we ask the neural network again, and so on 5 times. And then, with this research, we go further within the company to discuss what the neural network has told us. I see that people don't have this in their minds. We're not in kindergarten here, you know. So it probably takes 5 years and a person's own desire to change in order to nurture this idea inside themselves, that now we act differently. And if people do it this way, that's great. If they don't, I tell them to do it and they still don't, well, that really upsets me. And that's when we start thinking about what we're going to do next, because it's unlikely this will change anymore. The second point, of course, we have Kanban boards. I mean, in my opinion, it's really hard to function without Kanban boards at all. Even if you're just working alone, or if it's just you and your partner, your husband, wife, or you're doing some project like moving to another country, city, or apartment, you still need a Kanban board. There are a lot of tasks and they all get lost. You can always say, "I had so much going on this week that I just didn't get this done." But with a Kanban board, you can always see that maybe you didn't actually have that much to do this week, or on the contrary, that you had a lot. So in that case, it really comes with evidence to back it up. And here's another technical point. We have a chat bot, a daily stand-up bot, as we call it. It's in Telegram, always at the same time. I prefer 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We ask those 3 classic questions. What was done? What problems are there? And yes, what is getting in my way a little bit? Although that last point is kind of about complaining, so you could leave it out. Well, it's not even really about what problems there are, but more like what I'm working on right now and what I'll be doing tomorrow. Why 4 o'clock and not in the morning? Because for our mentality, well, actually, I don't know, mentality doesn't really exist, but anyway, for our culture, it's a time when there's still some time left before evening, and I can still manage to get something done if I see that I haven't accomplished much yet. And at the same time, yeah, so why not 6 in the evening? Because by then there won't be any time left to fix the situation. And why not in the morning? Well, because in the morning we all have big plans like I'll do this and that, the day is so long, and then as it turns out nothing gets done. That's why midday, closer to the afternoon after lunch, seems to me the most optimal time. On the one hand, you can already sum up some results of the day, and on the other hand, if those results are disappointing, there's still time to fix the situation. So yes, a Kanban board and a chatbot, a daily stand-up bot. And if you don't do this as a team, it might be met with resistance, but I think it's absolutely necessary. I mean, otherwise, how else? Otherwise, we'll all get bogged down in endless messaging. Yes, many people handle it differently. Some people write daily reports about what was accomplished during the day. But why make things complicated when you already have this? Hiring and working with people are truly mysterious topics, and we will keep unraveling them. We'll continue. Wishing you great employees and contractors. Goodbye for now.